Hello friends, today we are going to study about the concept of lateral entry in civil services. First we will study the recent context and controversy surrounding lateral entry. Then we will study the earlier instances of lateral entry in civil services. After that we will study about the roster system of reservation in appointment to various posts in government services. And finally we will do a critical analysis of the system of lateral entry, the points for lateral entry, the points against lateral entry, and the suggestions and way forward with respect to lateral entry in civil services. Now the recent context. On 17th of August 2024, UPSC advertised lateral recruitment for 45 posts at the rank of Joint Secretary, 10 posts at Joint Secretary level, and 35 posts at Director and Deputy Secretary level in different ministries and departments. A point to note here is that 9 years experience is required for the post of Deputy Secretary, 12 years experience is required for the post of Director, and more than 19 years of experience is required for the post of Joint Secretary. This move of announcement of 45 posts for lateral recruitment, it led to an outrage, as quota benefits are not applied to such single post recruitments. So these single post recruitments, also called as standalone post recruitments, here the reservation principle does not apply. At present, according to the DOPT instructions, the rules are that reservation will apply to any recruitment including contractual posts if the tenure is more than 45 days, and these posts were for 3 to 5 years duration. But the reservation will not apply to standalone posts or single cadre posts. So reservation will not apply to the standalone post or the single cadre post. This is the current policy. Now in these lateral recruitment announcement of 45 posts, no reservation was provided since they were classified as single post recruitments or standalone posts. Now the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi, he termed this recruitment as anti-national step, as it was snatching the reservation for SC, ST and OBCs in government jobs. Following this backlash, Minister of Personnel Jitendra Singh wrote to the UPSC chairperson to cancel the advertisement, and finally the UPSC cancelled the advertisement. Now what is the reason for lateral entry? Why should lateral entry be introduced? The DOPT says that lateral recruitment is a government initiative to achieve two objectives of bringing in fresh talent and augmenting the availability of human resources at the middle management levels, keeping in view their specialized knowledge and expertise in the domain area. So lateral recruitment brings in skills and expertise into the government services. It brings diversity and expertise, it brings innovative ideas, it addresses the skill gaps and shortages in specific domains, and it also increases the collaboration between the government and the private sector. Now, what were the earlier instances of lateral entry? So the earlier instances were in 2019 and 2021. In 2019, 63 posts have been filled through the lateral route, and out of the persons recruited, 7 persons quit midway. Now these lateral entry positions, they are open for the candidates from private sector, from the state government and public sector undertakings, from autonomous bodies, from statutory organizations, that is organizations established by the law made by respective legislature, from universities and recognized research institutes, and the tenure can range from 3 years to 5 years. In 2021, recruitments were invited for 3 posts of advertisements were given for 3 posts of joint secretaries, 27 posts of director and 13 posts of deputy secretaries through lateral recruitment, and a number of applications were received, and finally the UPSC recommended candidates for 31 posts and the remaining 12 posts became infructuous, according to the 2021-22 annual report of the UPSC. Now the genesis of lateral entry. In 2017, Niti Aayog in its India's 3-year action agenda on civil service reform. So in this report, India's 3-year action agenda regarding civil service reform, and the 3-year action agenda was from 2017-18 to 2019-20. The Niti Aayog suggested lateral entry inductions, and the reason cited was that since policy making is a specialized activity, so specialists are needed for policy making, and this will bring competition into the established career bureaucracy. Now, the Niti Aayog also suggested an alternative to this lateral entry. The alternative suggested was that instead of lateral entry, we can also try another thing, that is, the government officers may be encouraged to gain expertise in specific areas. And the current system of rapid rotation and frequent transfer of officers may be replaced by a system of longer postings according to specializations. So, the government officers may be encouraged to gain expertise in specific areas, and the current system of frequent transfer and rapid rotation of officers may be replaced by a system of longer postings according to specialization. So, according to the specialization, a person, an officer may have a longer posting in order to enable that officer to contribute in his expertise in a better manner in policy making and policy implementation. And the government officers should be encouraged to gain expertise in specific areas, and this will help bring talent, energy, and new dynamism in the current system. For tax reforms, Niti Aayog recommended that tax boards should be given flexibility to bring outside technical staff laterally to utilize the available information to ensure tax compliance. So, it suggested that outside technical staff should be brought in laterally into the tax boards to increase the efficiency of the tax boards. On 10th of February 2021, Prime Minister Modi criticized the work culture of IAS officers, questioning what objectives could be achieved by surrendering the country to babus. So, babus is the term used for these IAS officers. So, in a way, the Prime Minister supported lateral entry and criticized the current work culture of the IAS officers, since it may lack expertise and it contributes to delays in decision making and red tapeism. And under the Congress-led UPA government in 2005, the Second Administrative Reforms Commission under Veerappa Moily recommended lateral entry into government service. Now, is there a shortage of All India service officers? Answer is yes. According to a 2023 Parliamentary Panel report, there were only 442 IAS officers in the union government as against the required strength of 1,469. So there is a shortage. In December 2021, Department of Personnel and Training moved a proposal to amend the Indian Administrative Service Cadre Rules 1954 to depute IAS, IPS and Indian Forest Service officers to the centre without necessarily taking the state government's consent. At present, the norms are that the states have to depute All India service officers to central government offices, but it cannot be more than 40% of the total cadre strength in that state. Suppose in the Rajasthan cadre, there are 100 IAS officers. Now, out of these 140 have to be deputed to the centre. This is the current rule. And in order to depute the IAS officers to the centre, the consent of state governments is taken. But in 2021 December, DOPT tried to, it moved a proposal to amend the existing rules so that IAS, IPS and Indian Forest Service officers can be deputed to centre without the state government's consent, because the state governments, they were already overburdened with work and they were not willing to depute additional IAS, IPS and Forest Service officers to the centre. And centre was facing a shortage of these officers. So the DOPT moved a proposal to amend the current rules to allow these officers to be deputed to centre without the state government's consent. In 2020, Department of Personnel and Training sent a letter to the states that it was unable to fill vacancies in various central ministries. Around 40% or 390 central staffing scheme posts are at the joint secretary level. So this many vacancies at joint secretary level. 60% or 540 such posts are at the rank of deputy secretary and director rank. So a lot of vacancies at the central level. So DOPT sent a letter to the states that it was unable to fill vacancies in the various central ministries. Now, whether such appointments were made during the term of previous governments. So appointments through lateral entry were also made during the term of previous governments. Former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was inducted as Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry in 1971. So this was a form of lateral recruitment, lateral entry. Then he also served as Chief Economic Advisor from 1972 to 76, again a form of lateral entry. He then became Governor of RBI and later Finance Minister. Now retired diplomat Nirupma Rao. She also supports lateral entry. She said, today we need more specialists and experts in the system. She said, when we set up civil services post-independence, our first Prime Minister, Nehru, he brought in a number of lateral entry officers into the services. Strength lies in the numbers and we had none. The system did work and helped tide over scarcity, and of course, simultaneously our recruitment through UPSC exam began to add up and reinforce the numbers. So she says that lateral entry system was favored by our first Prime Minister and it helped to reinforce, and the conventional system of recruiting the candidates to the exam, it helped to add up the numbers and to reinforce the numbers. So we need specialists and experts in the system. So Nirupma Rao is supporting lateral entry. Now another retired IAS officer said, earlier also lateral entrants were recruited, but there were not many joint secretary or director posts per se which were being filled en masse. So earlier the number of posts that were being filled through the lateral entry system, they were less. And now if they have advertised 45 posts, then they should have followed the roster system of DOPT to apply reservation. So he supports, this retired IAS officer supports the roster system of reservations in the 45 posts advertised by the government. So he said that if so many posts are being advertised, so reservation should apply through the roster system. Now the issue of reservation. What is the roster system of reservation? Currently, reservation in government jobs is implemented through the 13-point roster policy or quota by rotation of the DOPT. Now the roster system, what is the roster system? It takes each department as a unit and not the ministries as a whole. This is further explained. Reservation rules don't apply as against the cumulative vacancies in all ministries. So reservation rules don't apply as against the cumulative vacancies in all ministries. We will understand this with the help of an example. For example, there are 3 ministries. Suppose there are a total of 3 ministries in the government. Hypothetically, let us think Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Agriculture, and Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Suppose there are 3 ministries in the government, and in the Ministry of Home Affairs there are various departments, and in a particular department there is 1 vacancy for joint secretary level post, and in other departments there is no vacancy, suppose. Now in the Ministry of Agriculture, in a particular department there is a vacancy for 2, there is a vacancy for 1 joint secretary level post. In another department there is another vacancy for joint secretary level post, and suppose in the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship there is again 1 vacancy for joint secretary. There are suppose 2 vacancies for joint secretary level posts. Now the total number of vacancies we can see in all these ministries is 1 plus 2 plus 2, that is 5 vacancies. Now reservation will not apply cumulatively to these 5 vacancies. It will not apply against the cumulative vacancies in all ministries, that is 5. It will not apply here. Instead, reservation will apply to treating each department as a unit. So this department in the Ministry of Home Affairs will be treated as 1 unit, and reservation will apply separately to this department. 1 vacancy of joint secretary, reservation will apply separately to this. Similarly, in the Ministry of Agriculture, in suppose this department there is 1 joint secretary post, reservation will apply separately to it. So each department will be taken as a unit and not the ministries as a whole. And reservation rules don't apply against the cumulative vacancies in all ministries. So reservation rules will not apply to these 5 vacancies. Instead, it will apply separately to individual departments in each ministry. Now, Mr. Jitendra Singh said that eligible candidates from reserved categories are considered along with other eligible candidates for lateral entry. However, reservation is not applicable for such single post appointment. Now we are going to study about this standalone post or single post appointment. in the subsequent lines. First, we will just see that DOPT instructions are that reservation must apply for any post even if it is a contractual post, if it is for more than 45 days duration, and the current post through lateral entry that had been advertised, they were for 3 to 5 year duration. The posts of joint secretary, director, and deputy secretaries, 45 posts, they were for 3 to 5 year duration. So reservation should have applied to them. But now, according to the current rules, reservation must apply for any post, even if it is a contractual post, if it is of more than 45 days duration. But there is an exception. There is a provision which says that if it is a standalone post, or which they call a single post cadre, then reservations need not apply. So this is what happened in the current context. The government announced 45 posts for joint secretary, director, and deputy secretary level, and the government called them as standalone posts, and hence did not apply reservation to these posts. Now, what is a standalone post? This applies to a situation where there is one post of vice chancellor or one managing director of PSU. Suppose recruitment is to be done for the post of one managing director in a public sector undertaking. Now, this is a single post cadre. This is a standalone post, and here reservations need not apply according to the current rules of DOPT. And the government has classified the posts of joint secretary, director, and deputy secretary as standalone posts, and hence has not applied reservation to them. And there was considerable opposition to this policy, to this recent advertisement by the government, because of which the government had to take back its advertisement. Now, according to Ashok Vardhan Shetty, a retired IAS, the UPSC has treated each of these joint secretary, director, and deputy secretary as subject specific. And though this is a narrow definition, it has covered non-standalone posts into standalone posts and then called them single post cadre and has not applied reservation. So Ashok Vardhan Shetty, a retired IAS, says that government has treated all these posts of joint secretary, director, and deputy secretary as subject specific, and government has given a narrow definition to them. It has wrongly classified them as standalone posts when in reality they are non-standalone posts. So, according to Ashok Vardhan Shetty, the government should have applied reservation to these posts. And because of all this opposition, the government finally took back its decision, and Minister of Personnel Jitendra Singh wrote to UPSC saying government would like to re-examine this matter. And finally, the advertisement for 45 posts was withdrawn. Now, retired IPS officer Yashovardhan Azad has supported the concept of lateral entry, and he says that efforts to bring in experts in the moribund bureaucracy started much earlier, and the contribution of lateral entrants, they are stellar contributions. For example, the Green Revolution by M.S. Swaminathan, the White Revolution by Varghese Kurian, the progress in the nuclear field by Homi Bhabha, the progress in space field, the economic revolution, the liberalization reforms by Manmohan Singh, the progress in missile technology by APJ Abdul Kalam, and the economic reforms by Montek Singh Ahluwalia. All these, they were brought by lateral entrants, and hence lateral entry is very important in civil services. And according to Yashovardhan Azad, retired IPS officer, he says that the entrenched Babu Mafia, a term used for the IS officers, they never allowed outsiders or lateral entrants. So these IS officers went to the best universities and foreign countries on taxpayers' money. So they used the taxpayers' money to go to foreign countries, ostensibly to modernize the system. So they said that we are going to these foreign countries to bring in new expertise, to bring in new knowledge and insights, so as to reform the system. But they did not do much. They came back writing papers on how to entrench it while tinkering with it here and there. So they just came back and wrote papers and just tinkered with the system. They did not bring any significant change, any revolutionary change in the system. Hence, lateral entry is required. In UPA 1 and 2, so during the tenure of the UPA 1 and 2 government, lateral entry system was tried, but it failed. In the UPA 2 government, recommendation that 10% post should be earmarked for lateral entry. So this recommendation was given that 10% post should be earmarked for lateral entry, but this recommendation was never acted upon. Now we will study the points for and against lateral entry. So first we will study the points for lateral entry. So the first point is that policy making is a specialized activity. And since lateral entrants are specialists or experts in their particular field, so they are needed in policy making. Second point is that it will bring, for example, we can see the medical department, the health department, the police department. So here specialists are needed because these departments need expertise. They need expert officers to head them. They need domain specialists to be there. Then lateral entry will bring competition into the established career bureaucracy. So if lateral entrants people are brought in, experts are brought from outside, then it will lead to competition. They will compete with existing civil servants, and existing civil servants will be motivated to perform better. Now, some people suggest that why bring lateral entrants instead? Why bring lateral entry into civil services? Instead, hire lateral entrants as consultants. Now, what is the drawback in this? If lateral entrants are hired as consultant, then they will not have any enforcement powers. They will not have the authority to get things done, and they cannot direct subordinates, and they don't have that much accountability if they are mere consultants. Instead, if they are recruited, they are brought in as officers, then they will have the authority to get things done. They can direct the subordinates, and they will have accountability to their superiors. They will be accountable to the people above them. So this accountability and having authority to get things done will help bring about changes in the system. So by being an officer and not consultant, you have the authority to get something done. You can direct subordinates and are responsible to the people above you. Now lateral entry will bring efficiency, that is, it will bring private sector management practices into public administration. It will help get things done. It will reduce delays and red tapeism. Also, there are a lot of vacancies in various central ministries. We just studied that out of required strength of 1469 IS officers according to a 2023 report, only 442 IS officers were present. So there were so many vacancies. So these vacancies can be filled by bringing in lateral entrants. Also, it will increase diversity and expertise. It will bring in innovative ideas and fresh perspectives. It will address skill gaps and shortages in specific domains. So it will address skill gaps. At present, the IS officers are generalists, and hence they sometimes make very impractical policies which are very difficult to implement at the grassroots level. So bringing in experts will help address skill gaps and shortages in specific domains. Lateral entry will help respond to complex challenges. So today the society is changing, and we need new skills and expertise in our administrative officers, and there are new challenges which can be faced only with proper expertise in the system. So lateral entry will help in responding to complex challenges. Also, it will enhance the collaboration between the government and the private sectors. Also, there is a potential for increased. Now, it will enhance collaboration between government and the private sector. It will help in bringing private sector management practices in the government. Also, the last benefit that we are going to study about lateral entry is potential for increased representation of marginalized posts through targeted lateral entry. Now, this is also a criticism. People say that if lateral entry system is introduced, then it will lead to compromising the interests of the marginalized groups, because as the government introduced 45 posts for joint secretary, director and deputy secretary level, and did not introduce reservation, saying that these are standalone posts. So if no reservation is introduced, then the concept of social justice is compromised. So this was a criticism for lateral entry, but a remedy for this is that we can also bring increased representation for marginalized posts through marginalized groups through lateral entry. So how can we bring increased representation? We can have that, suppose at a particular level the marginalized groups are less represented, so we can have targeted lateral entry. So through targeted lateral entry we can increase the proportion of the people from marginalized communities that are represented in the government. Now we will study the points against the system of lateral entry. So the first point is that the posts of joint secretary, deputy secretary and director, they are secretarial posts. Now they are secretarial posts which require administrative expertise. They require a lot of experience. Now currently we can see that the post of deputy secretary requires an experience of 9 years. The post of director requires an experience of 12 years. The post of joint secretary requires nearly more than 19 years of experience. So these are very experienced officers. And also at the recruitment stage itself, the civil service exam is a very tough exam. As an example, we can see in the civil services exam 2023, the total number of applicants were 13 lakh applicants. Out of them, only 1016 were selected in the civil services and only 180 candidates were selected for the IAS. So we can see that it is a very tough exam, and through a very tough exam process these candidates are selected and after that, even after being selected, they need a lot of experience in order to reach these posts of joint secretary, deputy secretary and director. And if we take in lateral entrants, they will just come in on the basis of a half an hour interview and a walk-in resume. So how can a half an hour interview match the experience of these officers who have years of experience in the administration and have been selected through a very tough exam? So in this way, joint secretary, deputy secretary and director, they are secretarial posts, and hence these experts, they are not suited. And how can you just decide that a person should be appointed on such a high post on the basis of a mere interview? Now next point against the system of lateral entry is the spoils system. So lateral entry may promote nepotism. Political parties trying to favor their party persons under the guise of bringing specialists. So if the lateral entry system is introduced in later years, it may deteriorate. It may deteriorate into a system in which nepotism prevails. Political parties may try to favor their own party persons under the guise of bringing lateral entrants or specialists. So this will compromise the merit. So as an example, this happened in Pakistan. In Pakistan in the year 1972, Bhutto was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and he started appointing his own party people to the Pakistan civil services. He started appointing his party loyalists in the post of deputy secretary to secretary in the Pakistan civil services. And after Bhutto was removed from power, when he lost power, then the next head of government, that is the next Prime Minister, Ziaul Haq, he dismissed the appointees by Bhutto. He dismissed the people appointed by Bhutto in the civil services, and he started inducting military people. As lateral entrants in the Pakistan civil services. So because of all these policies, these flawed policies of nepotism, of spoil system, the Pakistan civil services is in a mess. So lateral entry thus proved harmful. Then interview alone is insufficient to test the expertise of a person. So how can you decide just on the basis of an interview the merit of a person? An example is the Pooja Khedkar case. So Pooja Khedkar, who has been recently dismissed from the IS because she used fraudulent means to enter the services. She entered on the basis of a fake OBC certificate and a disability certificate. So the interview panelists, they were unable to detect that she was using fraudulent means. So interview alone is insufficient to test the expertise of a candidate. Then there are questions about the accountability and loyalty of the lateral entrants. As we have just seen that the spoil system can prevail, nepotism may prevail, and party loyalists may be appointed as lateral entrants, and also accountability of these people. There are questions about their accountability. If party loyalists are appointed, then they will not act in a fair manner. They will not act in an accountable manner. Then introducing lateral entry may have an adverse impact on the career advancement of existing civil servants. That is why the existing civil servants are opposing the system of lateral entry. Also, there is a potential for conflict of interest and bias. Now, a lateral entrant may be a person from the private sector. Suppose a person in a very senior position in a particular company. Now suppose if that person is brought into the government, then that person may try to favor his own company after entering the government. He may try to give undue benefits to his own business, to his own company. So there is a potential for conflict of interest and bias. Also, there are concerns about elitism and exclusion of marginalized groups. So government may introduce the system of lateral entry, and if it is introduced without reservation, then the interests of marginalized groups will be compromised. They may be excluded, and also concerns about elitism. So these are the points against the system of lateral entry. Now what should be done? What are the suggestions? First is that there should be clear criteria for lateral entry. There should be clear guidelines so that the system of lateral entry does not deteriorate into the spoil system, so that it is not misused, so that there is no scope for nepotism. Then ensuring transparency, accountability, and merit-based selection process. This should be done. There should be transparency, accountability, and there should be a merit-based selection process. So bringing in lateral entrance through a tough written test and then rigorous interview. So instead of bringing in lateral entrance merely on the basis of an interview, there can be a tough written test and then an interview. This will ensure transparency, accountability, and a merit-based selection process. Then, since the existing civil servants are opposing the system of lateral entry because they fear that it will compromise their career prospects. So balancing the need for lateral entry with the concerns of existing civil servants. So all stakeholders should be consulted. The need for lateral entry should be balanced with the concerns of the existing civil servants. Also, the Niti Aayog in its 3-year action agenda suggested an alternative to the system of lateral entry. And what did Niti Aayog say? It said that government officers may be encouraged to gain expertise in specific domains, in specific areas, and the current system of rapid rotation and frequent transfer of officers, it may be replaced by a system of longer postings according to specialization. So what Niti Aayog suggested that the government officers, they may be encouraged to gain expertise in specific areas. And currently the government officers, they are frequently transferred from one place to another. So this system may be replaced by a system in which there are longer postings. And if there are longer postings, then the government officer can contribute his or her expertise in the policy making and implementation in a better manner. Because if there are very short postings, if there is frequent transfer, the officer does not get enough time to contribute to the system. So it should be replaced by a system of longer postings. Now a point to note here is that Niti Aayog in its 3-year action agenda, it suggested the system of lateral entry. It favored the system of lateral entry, saying that it will bring specialization into the system. Now Niti Aayog also suggested, along with favoring the idea of lateral entry, it also suggested an alternative to it. It suggested that the existing government officers, they may be encouraged to gain expertise in specific areas, and the current system of frequent transfer can be replaced by a system of longer posting according to specialization of the government officer, to enable the government officer to contribute his or her expertise that the government officer has gained to improve the system, to better the system, and help in better policy making and implementation. Niti Aayog also suggested that the tax boards should be given flexibility to bring outside technical staff laterally to utilize the available information to ensure tax compliance. So Niti Aayog suggested that the tax boards can be given flexibility to bring in outside technical staff through the system of lateral entry. So this will improve the efficiency of tax boards. Also, applying the system of reservation in lateral entrance. So this is a suggestion that in the system of lateral entry, reservation should be applied in order to balance merit with social justice considerations. And another suggestion is ensuring diversity and inclusivity in lateral entry, to ensure that the interests of marginalized groups are also taken into account. Now finally, lateral entry, if it is ensured through a transparent and fair mechanism, after clearly setting out criteria and guidelines, it can help bring skills, expertise, and efficiency in the civil services. Now, the government needs to follow a balanced approach after addressing the controversy and the concerns associated with lateral entry, including social justice and reservation policy considerations. So, reservation policy should also be introduced. Interests of marginalized groups should not be compromised. The career prospects of existing civil servants, the adverse effect on the career prospects of existing civil servants, it is a concern. So the existing civil servants should also be taken on board. Interests of all stakeholders should be addressed, and a balanced approach should be followed. Now finally we are going to do a practice question on the concept of lateral entry. Now this question is critically analyze the concept of lateral entry in civil services. Critically analyze means that we have to give the points, both the points for and against the system of lateral entry, and we have to finally give suggestions and a conclusion which presents a balanced view. Now how will we approach this question? First write the introduction. Now introduction will include what is lateral entry. Introduction means the present context. First give the present context, that the government had advertised 45 posts for the post of joint secretary, director and deputy secretary level, and after considerable opposition the government has withdrawn its order. In this you can give the present context. Then you have to write about what is lateral entry. You have to write the definition of lateral entry. So it is a system in which experts are brought in from outside into the government, into the civil services, into the government system. And you have to give the purpose of lateral entry, why lateral entry is being introduced. So it is introduced to bring in expertise in the system to fill the skill gaps. Now then you will give the benefits of lateral entry. So in benefits you can talk about it brings diversity and expertise in the system. Diversity, it brings innovative ideas and fresh perspectives. It addresses the skill gaps in the system. It increases the collaboration between the government and the private sector. So these are the points you can include in the benefits of lateral entry. Then you have to talk about the controversy surrounding lateral entry. So in this you will talk about the concerns regarding lateral entry. One is that it will compromise. It is feared that it will compromise the merit-based system. The next concern is that it has a potential for nepotism and favoritism. Then it may adversely affect the career advancement of existing civil servants. And there are questions about the accountability and loyalty of the lateral entrant. So the ruling party may bring its own loyalists as lateral entrants in civil services. So their loyalty is suspect, their accountability is suspect. So these are the concerns. Then you can talk about the social justice and reservation policy concerns. Now, what are the social justice and reservation policy concerns? One is the potential impact on the representation of marginalized communities. Then concerns about lateral entry undermining the reservation policies. Also need for ensuring diversity and inclusivity in lateral entry. Diversity and inclusivity. And next is we need to balance merit with social justice considerations. So these are certain social justice and reservation policy concerns. Then you talk about the arguments against lateral entry. What are the arguments against lateral entry? We have talked about it. Argument against is that undermining traditional civil services system. So it may undermine the traditional system, civil services system, because at present also the civil servants are coming through a very tough exam. After that they gain many years of experience to become joint secretary, director, deputy secretary, etc. So they have a lot of administrative experience, and lateral entrants will just come in through a walk-in interview, through a half-an-hour interview and a resume. So how can you judge a person merely on the basis of interview? Then another argument against is there is a concern about a lack of accountability and transparency in the selection process. Also there is a potential for conflict of interest and bias. So a lateral entrant, suppose a business person, the head of a company is brought in as a lateral entrant, that person may try to favor his or her own company after entering the government. So there is a potential for conflict of interest and bias. Also concerns about exclusion of marginalized communities. Exclusion of marginalized communities is also a concern if reservation is not introduced in the lateral entry system. Concerns about elitism and exclusion of marginalized communities. So these are arguments against. Now arguments for lateral entry. It will help bring in skills and expertise in a rapidly changing world. Then it will ensure government ability to respond to complex challenges. It will help in collaboration between the government and private sector, collaboration and knowledge sharing. It will increase, there will be a potential for increased representation for marginalized groups through targeted lateral entry. So through targeted lateral entry, we can bring in more number of people from the marginalized communities. So this will lead to increased representation from the marginalized groups. Now, what is the way forward? So a way forward is addressing the concerns of all stakeholders. So balancing the need of lateral entry. We need to balance the need for lateral entry with the concerns of the existing civil servants. So we need to balance them. Ensuring transparency and accountability and a merit-based selection process. So instead of just an interview, we can have a written exam and an interview for lateral entry. It's a tough written exam. Then developing clear criteria, clear guidelines and criteria to prevent the system from deteriorating into the spoiled system. Also ensuring diversity and inclusivity in lateral entry is a way forward. And we also need to we need to include the marginalized communities into the lateral entry system. So this is a way forward. And finally, you can give a conclusion. The conclusion can be that if lateral entry is ensured through a transparent and fair mechanism after clearly setting out the criteria and guidelines, it can help improve the system, it can help bring skills, expertise and efficiency. And the government needs to follow a balanced approach after addressing the controversy and concerns associated with lateral entry, including the social justice and reservation policy considerations. So this was about the concept of lateral entry. And in this video, we have covered the controversy with respect to lateral entry, the recent context, the earlier instances of lateral entry, the roster system of reservation in government services, and finally a critical analysis of the system of lateral entry. Thank you for listening to this video.